Good evening. My name is Andreas Mogensen, and I'm an astronaut with the European Space Agency. It's now, about just over 5 months since I returned from my first mission in space on board the International Space Station. And this is one of the pictures that I took from the space station. It's taken from Cupola, which is our window module. It's actually 7 windows put together, which forms this giant window that we can sit by and look down at the Earth. And it's where most of the astronauts love to spend their free time, taking pictures and just looking at our beautiful planet. And most astronauts, when they return to Earth, they spend a lot of time talking about what a beautiful sight it is to see the Earth from space. And it really is. But something that struck me was the sight of the night sky, or the cosmos, which I found just as beautiful. Because looking out into the cosmos from the space station, you can see millions and millions of stars. And that, I found, was a very inspiring sight, because it gives you a sense of just how big our galaxy is and how big the universe is. And that really sets things into perspective. I mean, you cannot help but feel that the Earth and all of us on Earth are just a small part of something much, much larger. And that thought I find very optimistic, because when something is as large, almost infinitely large, as our universe, it must mean that there are many opportunities and many exciting discoveries waiting for us in the future. So even though Neil Armstrong said that it was a giant leap for mankind that he took in 1969 when he first set foot on the moon, what we did back then was actually just take a very, very small first step. And we've only just begun the exploration of space. And I'm certain that in the future, when we set sail from the Earth into space, just like the Portuguese explorers 500 years ago set sail from Portugal to sail around the world, that there will be many exciting discoveries waiting for us. That future that I'm talking about begins on board the International Space Station, which is our laboratory in space, circling the Earth 16 times every single day. The space station today has grown enormously big since the first module was launched in 1998. It's difficult to convey just how big the space station is today. I can tell you it's the size of a football field. It's about 80 meters long, about 100 meters wide. But it's not until you actually see it in space that you understand how big it is. And I remember as we were approaching the space station, about to dock in our small 3-person Soyuz spacecraft that we had flown up there with. And I looked out the window as we were approaching, and I saw the solar panels out of the window for the first time. And that's when I really realized just how big and impressive the space station is. And it is a very, not only impressive, but a unique laboratory that we have in space, where we can do scientific research in almost all fields, from physics to chemistry, biology, and physiology. And we can also develop and test new technologies. And this knowledge that we gain from the research and the technologies that we develop, these are things that we can use to travel further into space in the future. For example, to return humans to the moon, where we might in the future build villages or maybe a research station that we can send scientists to for 6 months or a year at a time, just like we do here on Earth in Antarctica by the South Pole. It'll also allow us to send humans to Mars, a mission that'll take between 2 and 3 years. But what's so interesting about this research is also the fact that it's dual use. It's research that not only benefits us in space, but also benefits mankind here on Earth. To take just one example, human physiology is an area of research that we spend a lot of time working with in space, on board the space station. Because a lot of things happen to astronauts in space. We tend to lose muscle, we tend to lose bone density, our immune systems are compromised, and it's important that we understand not just how and why that happens, but also how we counteract that. Because if we want to send humans further out into space, to the moon for a year, or to Mars, a mission that'll take 2 or 3 years, it's important that the astronauts arrive healthy and safe and return to Earth healthy and safe. But what's interesting is that we can also use that knowledge here on Earth, because weightlessness is very similar to being bedridden. If you're a patient hospitalized and confined to your bed for days or weeks at a time, you'll experience a loss of muscle and a loss of bone density that's similar to what astronauts experience in weightlessness. Weightlessness is also similar to the natural aging process that a lot of elderly people here on Earth experience. For example, osteoporosis, which is a loss of bone density, is similar to what astronauts experience in space. So by studying astronauts, we can help patients and people here on Earth as well. Another curious thing that happens in space is that you tend to grow. And some astronauts grow all the way up to 6 or 7 centimeters in height. And that's because in some ways our spines resemble a spring. And here on the ground, gravity compresses our spines. But once you're in space and weightless, our spines are no longer compressed and they tend to elongate, just like a spring does. And that can lead to a wide variety of problems. It can lead to back pain, it can increase your risk of discus prolapse later in life, but it also can lead to some practical problems, because the spacesuits that we wear are obviously tailored to us. And the seats that we sit in on board Soyuz when we have to land again are molded to us. And if you're suddenly 6 or 7 centimeters taller, well, you can no longer fit in your own spacesuit or sit in your own seat. And so one of the things I had to test during my mission is this suit. We call it a skin suit. Most of all, it resembles a wetsuit that you might use for diving, except that it has special fibers woven into it, which seeks to mimic gravity and compress the spine, and thereby prevent this growth that a lot of astronauts experience. What you also see on the picture is that I'm exercising on our bicycle on board the space station. It's one of 3 ways that we can exercise. We also have a treadmill for running, and we have a strength training device. Exercise is the only way that we know of today how to counteract this loss of muscle and bone density that we experience. And so for astronauts who are in space for more than a few weeks at a time, it's a requirement that they spend 2 hours every single day exercising. And that's not a very efficient use of your time if you're up there to do research. So this is still something that we're looking at, trying to find other ways to stay healthy in space without having to use 2 hours every single day to exercise. Robotic technology is also something that we work with a lot in space. And what we're very interested in developing is the technology that will allow astronauts and robots to cooperate more closely together in the future. We imagine that in the future, if we arrive at the moon or Mars, that we might have robots on the surface helping to build a base before the astronauts land themselves. And one of the key technologies that we'd like to develop is what we call force feedback, which essentially means that the astronaut has a way of feeling the force or controlling the force that the robot is using in solving a certain task. Today when you play a video game, today when you control a robot, it's very similar to playing a video game. You have a hand controller or a joystick, and you control the robot. But what it means is that certain very simple tasks, like picking up a glass of water, can be very difficult for a robot, because a robot has no intuitive understanding of the forces necessary that it needs to apply in its fingers when picking up the glass. And chances are the robot will simply crush the glass. But by giving the astronauts a way to control or sense this force, well, we can solve tasks that require greater precision and greater dexterity in the future. And so I had a chance to not only drive a robot here on the Earth from the space station, but also to solve simple tasks like inserting a peg into a hole. And to do that, I had a very simple joystick like this, but through that joystick I could feel, for example, the friction force that I needed to overcome when inserting a peg into a hole. And I know what you're all thinking now. You're thinking, this doesn't look very impressive, and you're probably right, it's just a joystick after all. But what we're working towards, is a full exoskeleton robot arm that you see here. This is a robotic arm that you can wear yourself. I mean, you put your arm into it, you move your arm, and the robot follows your movements. At the same time, the robotic arm sends back the forces to this exoskeleton arm that you're wearing, and through that arm you can feel the forces and control the forces. And this is very exciting technology, not just when we talk about space exploration, but also here on Earth. Because you can imagine doctors in hospitals in Europe performing surgery on patients in other countries using technology like this. I also think it's very exciting to know that we here in Europe have companies currently developing and building technology like this that will send up to the space station within the next year or two. Smart wearable technology is also another area that we're interested in. And before any conspiracy theorists here in the audience get too excited, I have to point out that this picture wasn't taken in space. It was taken underwater during one of NASA's NEMO missions, which takes place in an underwater laboratory, where I had a chance to live for a week together with several other astronauts, and I could work with and test some of the technology before bringing it into space on board the space station. The space station today is so big and so complex that it's impossible for the astronauts to have a deep knowledge of all the different systems that we have to work with. So we tend to work with the help of procedures and checklists. Most of all, it's like going to IKEA, buying a piece of furniture, and then assembling it at home with the help of your little instruction booklet. You go line by line, you read the instructions, and you follow them. That's a very inefficient way of working, especially in space when you're weightless, because you keep having to float between what you're working with and your laptop computer to read the next lines in the procedures. So what we'd like to develop is some kind of wearable smart technology, for example, glasses, where on the glasses themselves you can project the procedures that let you read or even see pictures or video that guides you through your tasks while you have your hands busy with whatever it is you're working with. And I'm sure this is technology we'll see a lot more of both on board the space station and here on Earth in the future. One of the absolute biggest challenges of spaceflight is getting into space, sending anything into space. It's very, very expensive. And so on board the space station, we try to reuse and recycle as much as we can, which means that all our wastewater, we rinse it and we turn it into drinking water. And that, by the way, includes our urine. So we tend to say that the coffee we had yesterday, well, it's the same coffee we have tomorrow. But to turn wastewater into clean drinking water requires a lot of energy and typically a lot of chemicals as well. Something that we're currently testing is a membrane which consists of biological proteins, similar to the proteins that you and I have in our bodies. And these proteins, they only permit the transfer of water molecules through the membrane. So it's a way to clean wastewater without energy and without chemicals, because it's through the membrane's own physical and chemical processes or properties, or if you will, biological properties, that the wastewater can be cleaned. And again, this is a very exciting technology, not just when it comes to spaceflight, but also here on Earth, because we obviously also have a need to clean wastewater here on Earth cheaply and without too many chemicals. The space station is also a fantastic place from which to observe the Earth. And I had a chance to work on an experiment where I had to try to film lightning phenomenon with the help of a simple, just a normal off-the-shelf camera. And these are special lightning phenomena that we call blue jets and red sprites. These are giant lightning that shoot upwards into space rather than down towards the ground. We only discovered these lightning phenomena by accident about 15, 20 years ago. And I guess that makes sense because normally when there's a thunderstorm, we're somewhere on the surface of the Earth and it's difficult to see what happens above the clouds. But it turns out a lot of interesting things happen. We just don't know very much about it. We don't know how often these blue and red lightning occur, or under what conditions they're formed, or even what effect that they have on our atmosphere. But we assume that they must have a considerable effect because they sometimes shoot all the way up to an altitude of 80 or 90 kilometers. One evening after dinner, I was sitting in Cupola again, our big window, looking down at the Earth as we were flying over India at night. And this giant thunderstorm developed. And luckily I had my camera with me, so I quickly pointed it towards this thunderstorm and started filming as much as I could. Actually, I didn't even really know where to point it because this thunderstorm was so large that lightning was going on all around me. And on this picture, you can see in the lower left-hand corner one of the solar arrays or solar panels of the space station, and then this next to it, this gigantic thunderstorm lit up by traditional lightning. After we passed the thunderstorm, I hurried back to my laptop computer to download the files because I had a feeling that I'd been lucky to film something special. And I got really excited when I looked through the files on the camera because I saw, among other things, this. And this is some of that red lightning that we call red sprites shooting up into space at the same time that there's this more traditional white lightning. And as I went through the recordings, I also came across this. And this is one of these blue lightning, these blue jets, again, shooting upwards into space. But not only that, I'd actually been so lucky to film this blue jet, a pulsating blue jet, shooting up 3 times in a row within a second or two. And here it's important that you pay attention because I have a short video of 10 seconds, but if you blink, you're going to miss it, and you don't want to miss it. So on the right-hand side, this cloud here you'll see in just 2 or 3 seconds, this blue jet right now should be there. Did you all manage to see that? If not, it's on YouTube, and I recommend you to go see it because it's impressive. After the mission, I had a chance to talk to the scientists behind this project, and they told me that this is the first time that this pulsating blue jet has ever been observed. So I think it's very exciting that we're still learning new things about our own planet. We're still making discoveries. It wasn't just when it came to lightning that I was lucky. I was also really lucky to take a picture of my home country of Denmark. Denmark is so far north that it's seldom that the space station flies directly overhead, which means it's seldom that we can see Denmark from space. And of course, I have to be honest, it's also seldom that it's sunny and cloudless and clear in Denmark. It's not like the weather here in Lisbon, unfortunately. There's something very special, not just about seeing your home country, but about seeing the Earth from space. Because there's a few things that you very quickly notice. First of all, when you're flying over the day side of the Earth, you don't see signs of humans. You don't see cities. You don't see bridges or roads. And you don't see borders between countries either. For all intents and purposes, the Earth could be uninhabited. It's only when you fly over on the night side of the Earth and when you see all the lights of the cities light up the night sky that you realize that there are people living here and just how many people there are. But when you're flying over the day side, you don't see any of that. The Earth might as well be uninhabited. Something else you also very quickly notice is the contrasting colors, especially the contrast between the blue colors of the water and then this pitch black color of space which surrounds us. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you see on the boundary between the Earth and space this very, very thin blue line. And that's our atmosphere. That's all that separates or protects us from the cold vastness of space. If that blue line disappears, it means we have no atmosphere. And without an atmosphere, well, there's no life on Earth. And so you get a sense of perhaps how fragile the Earth is, because that atmosphere doesn't look very thick. I mean, it looks like something that we need to take care of, and it is, because without it, as I said, there is no life on Earth. But that's exactly why we travel into space, and that's exactly why we live and work on board the space station, which, by the way, we've done for more than 15 years now. Because by working and researching in space, we get not only a better understanding of who we are and a better understanding of our planet Earth, but it also allows us to prepare for the future. A future where I'm certain we'll see villages on the moon and colonies on Mars. Thank you.